Imagine waking up in a world where death is no longer a shadow, but a neighbor. A world where one cough, one handshake, or even one breath could seal your fate within days. This was Europe in the year 1347, when the Black Death arrived. Within a few short years, this mysterious plague would wipe out nearly one-third of the entire continent's population. Villages turned to graveyards. Families were erased overnight. But hidden within this unimaginable tragedy was a truth far more terrifying than the plague itself. Men and women did not die equally. The Black Death revealed a chilling survival pattern between male and female, a pattern that exposes the very core of human nature. And it's a truth that still shapes our world today. Before the plague, life in Europe was already harsh and unforgiving. The average man was born into a life of labor, duty, and sacrifice. He worked the fields, carried the weight of wars, and bore the scars of endless battles against hunger and poverty. Women, on the other hand, lived lives bound to the household, raising children, tending to food, and holding together what little stability life offered. Survival was already fragile, but it was survival with rules that people understood. Then, in 1347, everything changed. Death no longer waited at the end of a long life. It came suddenly, violently, and without mercy. The plague came by ship. Fleas, carried on rats from Asia, brought with them a silent executioner, the bacteria known as Yersinia pestis. From Sicily, it spread across Europe like wildfire. Victims developed painful black swellings, high fever, and uncontrollable coughing of blood. Entire households collapsed in days. Imagine your neighbor alive and well in the morning and gone before nightfall. Imagine a family of 5 reduced to one survivor by sunrise. This was not just death, it was death at a speed the world had never seen before. And yet, within the chaos, something strange was noticed. When priests recorded the dead in parish books, when gravediggers buried entire towns, a pattern became undeniable. More men were dying than women. The difference was so consistent that historians today can still trace it in the bones of plague cemeteries. Why? Why were men collapsing faster? Why were women, against all odds, enduring? The truth is brutal. Men were the front lines of exposure. They were the gravediggers, the guards, the traders, the ones who carried the bodies. Men were also the risk-takers, fleeing towns in desperation, seeking work in contaminated markets, stealing food when supplies ran out. Every choice brought them closer to infection. And biology was no ally. Male immune systems, driven by testosterone, are weaker in the face of infection. Women, protected by the immune benefits of estrogen, fought off the plague with the resilience nature had built deep within their biology. Men fell first, women endured.
But here lies the deeper revelation. This wasn't just coincidence. Evolution had written this code long before the plague. Female survival equals species survival. A single man can father children with many women, but one woman can only carry so many children in her lifetime. Women's survival ensures humanity's survival. And so, across millennia, biology forged women to endure disease, famine, and hardship with stronger defenses. Men, on the other hand, were evolution's gamble, expendable, risk-taking, and sacrificial. The Black Death simply revealed what nature had designed all along. As men died in larger numbers, Europe itself began to shift. Entire villages lost their male workers. Families were left in the hands of widows. Women, who once lived under the strict control of fathers and husbands, suddenly inherited land, wealth, and responsibility. For the first time, women were running businesses, managing farms, and making decisions that were once unthinkable. The plague had not only changed survival, it had quietly rebalanced power.
What does this mean for us today?
The Black Death was more than a medieval tragedy. It was a mirror, reflecting truths about male and female nature that have not changed. Men are the warriors, the risk-takers, the sacrificial protectors. Women are the survivors, the nurturers, the secure foundation of the species. When danger comes, men run toward it. Women seek safety from it. And even now, in our modern world, when crisis strikes, in wars, in disasters, in pandemics, the same ancient instincts rise again. But the story doesn't end with survival statistics or graves filled with the fallen. No, the Black Death left behind something far more haunting. Because when you strip away the numbers, when you look closer at who lived, who died, and why, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. It wasn't random. It wasn't just chance. It was something written deep inside human nature itself. Something about how men and women are wired differently when everything is at stake. And once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it.
The plague didn't just kill. It exposed the hidden rules of male and female survival. And that revelation is where our journey truly begins. As the plague's shadow finally began to lift, Europe looked less like a thriving civilization and more like a battlefield of survival. Empty homes, entire villages silent, and among the ruins, only the survivors remained, confused, traumatized, and desperate to rebuild. But here's where the story takes a shocking turn, because the very patterns of survival that emerged during the Black Death would now reshape the roles of men and women in ways no one expected. With nearly 1 out of every 3 Europeans gone, labor became scarce. Fields were empty, shops were closed. Families that once relied on male workers suddenly had no one left. And in this vacuum, women began stepping into roles society had long denied them. At first glance, it looked empowering. Women began inheriting land. Some became business owners. Others managed farms and estates for the very first time. For a brief moment, it seemed like the plague had unlocked new freedom for women. But beneath this surface shift, something much darker was happening. Because when men and women compete for survival resources, hidden instincts rise to the surface. And in this case, female survival strategies began to expose themselves more clearly than ever before. Men had survived the plague by brute endurance. Those who were stronger, resistant, or lucky enough lived on. But women's survival was not only biological, it became strategic. Records from 14th century court documents show an unusual trend. Widows quickly remarried, often securing wealth and land from multiple deceased husbands. Chroniclers noted women who, in the span of just a few years, had inherited estates through the deaths of 2, even 3 men. To the church, this looked like sin and opportunism, but from a biological and psychological lens, it was pure survival instinct, female hypergamy in action. Women aligning themselves with the next strongest provider, ensuring their bloodline's survival in a collapsing society. Now, pause for a second and think about this. In the aftermath of the worst plague in history, men rebuilt by enduring suffering, but women rebuilt by adapting, shifting alliances, and securing resources. 2 different survival codes, both valid, both ruthless. And here's where the red pill perspective starts to echo across history. The philosophers of that time may not have had words like hypergamy or evolutionary psychology, but they noticed the patterns. The Italian writer Boccaccio in the Decameron observed how quickly women found comfort in new marriages, often before the graves of their husbands had even cooled. To moralists, it was shocking, but to biology, it was predictable. This is the terrifying truth. Survival doesn't care about romance, or vows, or morality. Survival follows patterns, and the Black Death revealed those patterns in full view. Let's break it down even deeper. Women, biologically, have fewer reproductive opportunities than men. Every choice matters more. Every mate, every provider, every protector. In times of plenty, this survival code hides beneath layers of culture, religion, and morality. But in times of collapse, like the Black Death, the mask comes off. Suddenly, women who once swore lifelong loyalty to one man were realigning themselves to whoever could provide protection and food. Love became a luxury. Survival became the law. And men? Their survival instinct drove them in another direction. Historical reports describe men throwing themselves into work, rebuilding cities, digging graves, and fighting off disease with sheer force of will. Masculinity in its rawest form emerged through action and endurance. But while men built, women positioned. This divide left one chilling pattern. Women survived through adaptability. Men survived through sacrifice. And when the dust settled, it was often women who had secured their lineage, while men had given their lives. Think about what that means. A man could die rebuilding his community, leaving behind nothing but his labor. A woman could remarry, inherit, and continue her family's survival without lifting a sword or tilling a field. To the church, this imbalance looked immoral. To us today, it looks like a blueprint of female survival. And this isn't just medieval gossip. Modern evolutionary psychology confirms it. Female mate choice has always adapted to conditions. In stable societies, women value long-term providers. In unstable ones, they shift towards dominance, protection, and resources, fast. The Black Death was the ultimate test of this instinct.
So when historians tell us that the plague changed Europe forever, they're not just talking about population size or economics. They're talking about gender dynamics. Because women didn't just survive the Black Death, they leveraged it. By the 15th century, Europe was seeing something entirely new: women in positions of economic power. Female landowners, merchants, and even widows who had accumulated more wealth than their male relatives. Entire legal battles broke out over property rights, inheritance laws, and remarriage laws. And behind every one of those cases lay the same survival strategy: secure, adapt, outlast. This is why when we study the plague today, the story isn't just about rots and fleas or death tolls and medical ignorance. It's about something far more human: how survival exposes the raw truth of male and female nature. And here's the paradox.
While women gained short-term advantages, society itself became suspicious of them. In some cases, widows were accused of witchcraft, blamed for surviving when others perished. After all, in the eyes of grieving men, how could a woman move on so quickly without some unnatural force at work? But in reality, it wasn't witchcraft. It was biology. The plague didn't create female hypergamy, it revealed it. And this revelation terrified men, because if love, loyalty, and morality could be stripped away so easily by disaster, what did that say about human relationships? Were they built on genuine devotion, or just survival instincts dressed in prettier clothes? The Black Death forced men to confront this question, and centuries later, the Red Pill would echo the same truth. Beneath everything we believe about romance lies the cold machinery of survival. But here's the twist most people miss.
While women seemed to win in terms of survival strategies, men weren't powerless. Those who endured became the backbone of Europe's recovery. They rebuilt cities, reestablished economies, and laid the foundation for the Renaissance itself. Without male sacrifice, there would have been nothing left for women to inherit. So the terrifying pattern wasn't that one gender triumphed over the other. It was that both survived in radically different ways that exposed truths we still wrestle with today. Now, you might be asking, what does all this have to do with us? Why should we care about how women behaved during a plague 6 centuries ago? The answer is simple. Because the same survival codes revealed in the Black Death are still running in our veins today. From modern dating apps to marriage statistics, from divorce courts to hypergamy debates, the very same instincts that drove survival in medieval Europe are shaping relationships now. We just don't see them as clearly because our crisis looks different. But what if another collapse came? Another disaster? economic, or biological? Would the masks slip again? Would survival reveal the same hidden patterns? History suggests the answer is yes.
And in the next part of this story, we'll push this even further, unpacking how the very psychology of love itself may just be a biological trick designed to keep these survival codes alive. And that brings us to the most unsettling truth of all.
What if love itself, the most celebrated, poetic, and powerful force we humans believe in, is not what it seems? What if it's just biology's clever trick, a survival program coded deep in our DNA to ensure that men and women keep playing their roles in the great game of reproduction? The Black Death hinted at this possibility. When society was stable, love looked eternal, wedding vows, loyalty, songs of romance. But when society collapsed, love dissolved almost overnight, revealing the instincts underneath. Attraction became less about passion and more about survival. This is where psychology meets biology. Modern neuroscience tells us that love activates the same regions of the brain as addiction. The dopamine rush of attraction, the oxytocin bond of intimacy, the serotonin lows of heartbreak, they all mimic chemical dependency. In other words, love feels like magic, but it's really chemistry. Now, connect this to the Black Death. Why did widows remarry so quickly? Why did women align themselves with new providers? Because the chemical bonds of love weren't eternal, they were survival tools. When the environment changed, the brain simply rewired. Biology overrode memory. And men, their love too was revealed as fragile. Many men clung to their wives and families, sacrificing themselves to care for the sick. But once those wives were gone, men also remarried quickly, often to secure labor for farms or heirs for their property. The illusion of romance cracked. What remained was the raw machinery of survival. Here's the terrifying part. We think of ourselves today as more evolved, more enlightened, but are we? Consider divorce rates. Consider how quickly relationships form and break on dating apps. Consider how attraction shifts when someone gains or loses resources. Aren't these just modern versions of the same survival codes? History doesn't just repeat, it exposes. The Black Death didn't just kill millions, it stripped away the illusions and revealed that male and female survival strategies have always been different, complementary, and sometimes brutally unfair. Men endure, women adapt. Both survive. So, what lesson do we take from this? One, that biology will always win. We can write poetry, build laws, even craft religions around love, but when crisis hits, the survival code runs the show. Two, that understanding these patterns doesn't mean becoming cynical, it means becoming aware. When you know that attraction, loyalty, and even love itself are shaped by survival instincts, you stop living in illusion. And three, perhaps most importantly, that survival isn't about one gender defeating the other. It's about recognizing the roles we each play. The plague taught us that when men sacrifice and women adapt, humanity continues even through the darkest times.
This doesn't make love meaningless. If anything, it makes it more profound. Because knowing that love is biology, yet choosing to live it as poetry, that's the human paradox. The survivors of the Black Death didn't have our science, but they lived this truth. They rebuilt civilization not because love was eternal, but because survival demanded it. And in their survival, we see our own reflection. So the next time you hear a love song or read a romantic poem or see a couple holding hands in the street, remember this. Behind every gesture, every vow, every kiss lies a survival code written in fire during history's darkest hours. And the Black Death was the moment it was exposed for all to see. The question is, if another catastrophe came tomorrow, would we see the same patterns again? History suggests we already know the answer.